We're live.
Well, hello and welcome everyone to the next installation of the Oregon Coast Artist Talk series. It is October 11th, 2020, and it is a rather blustery and overcast day here on the Oregon coast. Yet that doesn't mean that people aren't coming to the beach. The parking lot at the Night Beach Turnaround is still full. Our discussion today, panel discussion, is entitled Rick Bartow in Context. We will be talking about Rick Bartow, a native son to Newport and one of the country's most important contemporary artists. We'll be talking about his work in the context of contemporary art and Native American art. We'll be talking about the lithograph that he has in the current Oregon Coast online art show. And we'll be talking about efforts to preserve the Rick Bartow legacy. But before we get into the program, let me just say that my name is Tom Webb. I'm the director here at the Newport Visual Arts Center for the Oregon Coast Council for the Arts. This Oregon Coast Art Talk series is put on in conjunction with the Oregon Coast Online Art Show, which you can check out on the Coast Arts website, and is being put together by the Oregon Coast Council for the Arts, as well as the Newport Visual Arts Center. We are streaming live. I'm streaming live here from the Runyon Gallery at the Visual Arts Center. We are also streaming on YouTube live right now, as well as Facebook. And you can be sure to leave your comments and questions with the live chat function on YouTube. And you can comment on our latest Facebook post, and we will respond to those questions and comments. I'm excited this week. We are partnering with the Frolic Gallery in Portland and with Karen Murphy, who is a member of the Bartow, a trustee for the Bartow estate. So welcome to Karen and Charles. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
It's wonderful. We're so happy to be here and get to talk about Rick. Anytime we get to talk about Rick is a good time.
Right. Awesome. Let me give a little bit more background on Rick Bartow. He lived and worked in Newport, graduated from the Western Oregon State College in 1969 with a BA in secondary art education. He was a Vietnam veteran, a longtime musician and songwriter, a widower, an enrolled member of the Mad River Band of the Wiyot Indians, and is considered one of the most important leaders in contemporary Native American art. His art is held in over 100 public collections and was subject of over 100 solo exhibits at museums and galleries, including the retrospectives, Things You Know But Cannot Explain, organized by the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art at the University of Oregon, in collaboration with the Frolic Gallery. Rick is an incredibly established artist in the Native American community and the contemporary art community. Karen, I want to introduce you a little bit more and have you talk a little bit about Rick in the context of his local community, the Oregon coast, and the Native American community. You met Rick at a New Year's Eve mini powwow in Siletz in 1992, and you started attending the Singing Salmon Sweat Lodge with Rick and his elder, Walter Klamath. From that shared experience, your life became intertwined with Rick, enjoying his music at Moe's Annex, the Cosmos, APR Place, and Cafe Mundo. Rick sought out her husband, Jade, to engineer the sculptural pieces Rick had created into a steady whole, and the family showed up for every show and exhibit. Today, you, along with Bill Avery and Teresa Wisner, manage the Bartow Trust, which includes his remaining pieces of art and his original music. The charge of the trust is to enhance Bartow's presence and reputation in the panoply of great American artists. So again, welcome, Karen, and thank you for sharing your personal insights with around Rick.
You bet. It's really good to see you today, Tom. And I really cherish this opportunity to talk about and remember those early days with Bartow. The Sweat Lodge was such an important part of his life when we met and our lives intersected. he and Walter had been working very hard to establish a sweat lodge that was dedicated to recovery. And Walter lived on a piece of land that was originally given to his grandmother as part of the, I don't know exactly what the proper words are, but after they moved all the different coastal clans up from California to the Siletz Reservation, when they dissolved the tribe, they gave land to each of the Indian Native American families. So the land that we were on was considered sacred land because it was given to his grandmother. And despite the entreaties of many of the white settlers for her to sell to them, she did not sell to them. She managed to pay the taxes and keep that land. So that was very special and sacred land. There's a tributary of the Siletz River that runs as one of the borders to the land. So our sweat lodge, their sweat lodge, the one that they created, was right there on the banks of that tributary. And I think the wonder and the beauty of it was that Rick and Walter were given instructions that this sweat lodge was to be traditional, but not traditional in the sense that it was open to men and women alike, elders and children. It was open to all races. The only reason why you would come to that sweat lodge is to take care of your own recovery in this group setting and with spirit.
Mhm.
So it was an amazing way to get to know Bartow, because he was, as he had been since returning from Vietnam, in the midst of his healing process.
Mhm.
And you know about his musicianship as well as his art. Through the sweat lodge, we sang our prayers. Rarely did we speak a prayer, but we used music, traditional and inspirational music, and music from the Christian tradition as well. We sang Amazing Grace an awful lot in the sweat lodge. So it was wonderful to come together with this man in this way, because of the different levels that we were able to relate on.
Right. And it really, Rick truly was a native son to this region and the Central Coast, and growing up in South Beach and maintaining his residence and presence in the region, and just being a vital and active member of the community. Can you talk a little bit more about his sort of, progression from, well, maybe talk a little bit about his love for the area and his progression from a child in South Beach to establishing more of his relationships with the different Native communities and tribes, and how that grew over time?
Right. Well, the pieces that I know are about his grandfather, who arrived in this part of the coast by walking from California. That's how he got here. And for a time lived in the north part of Lincoln County, around Lincoln City and Rhodes End, and then eventually found his way back to South Beach and got a piece of land that became the family's land. So that connection to the ocean and to the bay and the tributaries, to the trees, the vegetation, to all of the animals. When you live near the water, we're so blessed to be in relationship with the salmon and the sea lions and the anchovies and all of the comings and goings of the tides. It's very emotional just to reside here. So that's where Rick grew up, and I remember him talking about picking wild asparagus from the trenches where they would grow. It's sort of in the marshlands of South Beach. Of course, he knew all of the birds and the coyote and bear and all the creatures that came and went. And when he was growing up there, it was pretty uninhabited. And there was a lot of forest land that backed up from the bay that became part of his childhood playground. And he lived there, golly, for most of his life. I think he only spent the last maybe 15 years of his life in Nye Beach, which is where he was born.
Right.
I've always found it a fascinating piece of trivia about Rick's life, that he was born in a house that was serving as a maternity hospital in Nye Beach, the first iteration of a medical center here in Newport. And when he died in a house that was just 3 blocks south of that.
Right.
So he was truly a native son.
He had a couple really nice quotes in the newspaper article that was in the Newport News Times on Friday about how Rick was so unpretentious about his accomplishments as an artist, and how he carried himself as just an everyman, if you will, around the community. Do you want to talk about how he related to his community here in Newport and beyond?
Well, I think the word that I would start with is accessibility. Rick was such an open person in regard to his interactions with the folks who lived here. And he had an ability to make everybody feel like they were in a special relationship with him. And he had a routine. If you wanted to find Rick in the morning, you would know to go to Panini's. If you wanted to find him at lunch, you'd know to go to the Nye Beach Cafe. In the evenings, he would be often playing music in one of the local venues. Always approachable, always open to meeting new people and having those connections with everyone who lived here. In those days, and I certainly hope when we come out of this period of isolation, that we can experience again what it's like to be in that close-knit network. So, he'd be playing music with just his band, but different musicians, singers would come and go. I remember he reached out to one of the younger men in the community and had him come and play guitar with the band to help him get more comfortable with a public appearance. And the poor kid, he was so shy, he had to play with his back to the audience, but it didn't matter. He was up there on the stage with Rick, and they were all jamming together. And that's how it was at his studio as well. When he worked out of South Beach, when he worked in the studio where he created the welcoming poles that went to DC. Even after my husband passed, and he would come and work out of this shop on my property to do sculpting, I would never know who would also be out there visiting with him, sitting around the wood stove and just chatting up the latest gossip.
Yeah.
He was still friends with the guys he went to high school with. He would see them and hang out with them too. So it wasn't hard to believe he was as famous as he was to the outside world, but it was kind of jarring when you would meet people who that was their relationship to him, was through his fame, because he was just Rick Bartow to us, Yeah.
Well, thanks, Karen. That's obviously was a very special and continues to be a special relationship with you and Rick. And thank you for orienting us to Rick's life in this region and to the community here. I'm going to transition to Charles Froelich, director of the Froelich Gallery, and let me give people a little bit of your background, Charles, before I hand it over to you. Charles received his BFA in Sculpture and Art History from the University of North Texas in 1989. In 1992, he began working at Jamison Thomas Gallery and met Rick Bartow. Jamison Thomas Gallery being one of the most influential and important galleries in Portland at the time. Charles worked closely with William Jamison to organize Rick's gallery business, including several exhibits in Portland, Canada, and Germany, and a concert with Cyrano and the Snub-Nosed Dullars at the gallery in Portland. I wish I was at that concert. In the summer of 1995, William Jamison passed away, and then in October, Charles launched Froelich Gallery, where the first exhibition was a solo show with Rick. What a way to open a gallery. Charles worked closely with Rick until his passing in 2016, and he continues to work with the Bartow Trust and trustees to further Rick Bartow's legacy. Charles is active in the community and has volunteered on boards such as the Cascade AIDS Project, the Portland Art Museum's Gilkey Print Center, the Portland Art Dealers Association, the Smithsonian National Museum of the Native American Indian, and most recently Crow's Shadow Institute of the Arts in Pendleton. So thank you again, Charles, for being here and helping us think about Rick's work in context of contemporary Native American artwork.
Absolutely. Well, Tom, thank you so much for hosting this conversation and pivoting to do the online show and including Rick's work in it. And Karen, it's a treat to get to talk in public with another person to witness that our conversations can be, and also Tom, you'll help keep us organized. Karen and I can be like a flea on a hot skillet and it's like bing, 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 and all these thoughts are rolling around in my head. So
right.
I'm glad you sent us an outline to tell me what to talk about. Thank you. It's a long relationship with Rick, and Karen, as you said, the people in the community knew Rick as just like the guy that plays music, or, you know, oh, I see him when I go get coffee and pastries. Mm-hmm. And Rick was the artist that I did the most. I hustled so much. I mean, for all of these years, it's like phone calls, emails, letters coming in, people walking in the door. There's always something going on for Rick that, I mean, it's not Rick saying, hey, Charles, will you do this? It's people calling or contacting me, contacting the gallery, wanting to include Rick in shows. And so in some ways there's this, I mean, if I didn't know Rick personally, I'd be like, wow, there's all this responsibility and pressure. And Rick was like, oh, okay, let's have a good time. And he made us want to work harder because he was so enjoyable to be around. So he did, when he visited the gallery, it was absolutely like we could sit down and have a comfortable conversation. And it was not just what's the business that needs to get done, but it was, yes, we took care of business and we went deep into the conversations about his art and to the strategies of representing him. But he wanted to know about our families and he wanted to talk about how we're doing, our health, and he always wanted to go get sushi with us. And he always wanted to have a cup of coffee and not do work and just sit and talk, because you could tell he was interested in people and he was interested in the long-term relationships. And it was evident by the people, like every week somebody would come in and say, I went to high school with Rick, or people would say like, oh, we were sweethearts once, or they'd come in like, will Rick be here at the opening next month? And they'd get all dreamy eyed. And this would be artists of every age level. And it was so fun to have this experience. It was so rewarding and also grounding to work with somebody that had global demand and had their feet firmly planted on the ground. So
And
there's
you,
there's that little course.
can you talk a little bit about the work and how it came out of his studio? I mean, the term I heard the most when thinking about Rick and his work is mark making, and I think he used that term as well. So how would he didn't have just one style or one medium, I would say, but talk to me about how you saw his work as it was coming out of the studio per se, and how it maybe evolved or went in different directions over the years.
Mm-hmm. Well, Tom, you had asked me to give a couple thoughts about it. Where does Rick, give some context about Rick, his artwork in general, both Oregon, American, contemporary art, Native American art. So if I gathered a few thoughts, if I could give a short discussion of that and then let's dive into the mark making.
Okay, that sounds good.
But Rick, hanging out at his studio, you always met a cast of his friends and family, and there were discussions with his brothers were always so enjoyable, and his high school and college friends, because they'd tell these stories. Like in high school or junior high, Rick was he was kind of the science nerd in a way. Like he had jars of insects on his walls, but then he had portraits all over his bedroom wall that he was drawing of his classmates and friends, and he was always making art. And I know the VAC had that great show from Newport Collections, and there were some really early works, you know, a shrimp, the fishing boat going out to sea, which people start with. But then Rick's parents, Rick's mom, Mabel, really could see that Rick wanted to make art, and she encouraged it. And I want to say that's kind of rare in a parent. No matter what the city, a child that says, I want to go to law school is probably like, the parents are like, yay, and or I want to go to get my doctorate and be a doctor. But someone who's saying like, I want to study art and I want to be an artist, or I want to make art, it's like, and how long are you going to live in the house with us? Are we going to pay you rent forever? But his parents saw that. They could see he had something. He was playing music. He was already a gifted musician in college, if not high school, and his artwork. So Rick got to go to a high school art camp down in Ashland, and he met some professors from Southern Oregon University, or from SOC at the time, and they were international. You know, they had Italian names, and they were showing him artwork by the old masters and by European artists. And Rick said to me that his mind started to be blown at that time. Like, there are artists there are humans, people like us, that have made art about their life for hundreds, thousands of years. And Rick could see he was one of them. Then, so he entered, this is one of my favorite stories about Rick, is he entered the state fair art competition, the high school competition, and he won an award. And he was there at the judging, or at one of the events, and one of the jurors happened to be from Western Oregon University. And I don't remember if this was Dan Cannon or Jim Mattingly, but there were a couple of professors. There was one professor at the state fair, and they said, well, hey, if you want to go to college, come talk to us at Western, and your work is really good, and we'll help you with admissions. And I don't know if they offered him a scholarship on the spot, but Rick just realized that's where he wanted to go. So from high school, he entered a state college with the intention of taking art classes. And so if you will, visionary or prodigy type I mean, it's not a surprise to me because Rick was genius in so many ways. It's not a surprise to me that even in high school, or hopefully, I'm sure before, people could see that he had special radar to the world.
Mhm.
So he goes to Western, he gets his bachelor's, and he's preparing for an avenue in life of teaching and making art, and he gets drafted and goes to Vietnam, just like thousands of young men across our country. And Rick was spared fighting on the front line, but he was still there. And they knew that Rick was smart and organized, and he had a desk job, but he also brought his guitar, or he found a guitar when he was in Vietnam. And how he made his way to the hospital, I bet it was just Rick, because he was that cool, that he knew he had to be there with the people that were suffering, that needed something the most. And so he was in the emergency rooms and he was in the hospitals in Vietnam playing music for the wounded, for the soldiers that were trying to recover. And I mean, the thing that just, it's so painful to imagine, but Rick would say he sang these fellow soldiers until they sang to them until they died. And that was with Rick for the rest of his life. So here, take this young man who from college from Western Oregon is plucked into Vietnam, into a war zone, and he's faced with death and dismemberment in such a brutal way. He comes back to Newport in the 70th. There is a caboose to my train of thought, and I swear I will get this. This will have continuity.
No, it's a great story.
So he comes back to Newport, and just like so many other Vietnam veterans, and I'm sure World War I veterans and Korean War veterans and World War I and II, what population of people, veterans, are beset with so many struggles or hurdles afterwards? You have to be really strong or have some act of denial to not let it affect you. And it really affected Rick. And so the 70s were very tough for Rick. And he said he drank and drank until he was blotto, and just to try to get rid of all of the visions and the nightmares and the terrors and the PTSD.
Mhm.
And in 1979, he got sober. And that's when he realized that he had a life. He wanted to remain in the living, and he wanted to get on with his life. And through a lot of work with Walt and at the Silet's Wellness Center and the Sweat Lodge, Rick lived a sober life from then on, from 1979 on until his death. So Rick is inspiring in so many ways, and among them is his ability to stand up to the alcoholism and PTSD and look it in the face and realize his shortcomings, but to just confront it. And he said the only way through it is through it. And so he worked through these. He worked hard his entire life, and he was a good man through and through. So here, 1979, he remembers, he had been making art throughout the 70s, but it had been an act of exorcism, like to get rid of his nightmares and to expel the night terrors and the terrors of war. So, and he said he burned all of that art. There were burn piles out on the South Beach property on Idaho Point. And I mean, I saw them. They were, everybody had a burn bucket that, you'd throw some garbage in and burn every now and then. But Rick's had old artwork in it. And I did not see paintings and drawings and sculpture that he had burned, because I met him many years after he stopped burning his art. So Rick, even through the depths of alcoholism, he was making art and working on that. and practicing. He just said it was too much of a burden for anyone to see the artwork that he made in the 70s. And so he couldn't force that on anybody to see it too. So 1979, he starts keeping his artwork and keeping his drawings and his paintings and sculpture. So that's the Enlightenment year in my mind for Rick, is when he really started to become a full, living, like enjoying and being a part of the world. So the context is Rick knew that there was a world of art out there, but he was also devoted to staying at home. And he loved living on the Oregon coast. He loved living in Newport. He loved his mother and family so much. He loved being in the rain. He did not want to live in the Willamette Valley. He did not want to live in Eastern Oregon. He was like, too much sunshine. So he wanted to live in Newport. And he and Julie made a wonderful life there, playing music and making art in Newport. And Julie Swan, his amazing wife, the bass player in their band, in Cyrano, the Snub-Nosed Dullards, and other bands, she knew it. She gave Rick the confidence too. She understood what Rick was about, and she encouraged it. So it's a real blessing, and their marriage was just beautiful and positive. And and Julie understood that Rick's place was definitely in Newport. He was a family man. He loved his family dearly, I don't know how else to say that about Rick, but he is a family man. He was a mama's boy. He took care of his kids. And but Julie knew it was work. Now, she also encouraged him to quit his day job, because that was not making art, but to encourage him in a way to make his artwork in the studio. That was his gift. That was where he would shine and find his full meaning in life. And that's what he did. And he worked his butt off. And I met him in 1992. So this is, okay, I'm going to say 79, he starts making art in earnest and stops burning it. 1986 is when, or 85 is when he joined William Jameson's gallery, or maybe 86. There are a couple of conflicting documents from the old Jameson Thomas paperwork, but William Jameson opens his gallery in 1980. So he had been showing artists' work from around the country and around the Northwest. And a mutual friend of Rick and William's brought Rick and his artwork to William. So in 1986, Rick gets real affirmation from a commercial gallery. And there's William, who also had been an artist, was an exceptional, inspiring human being, but he was a consummate dealer. He took his artist work to art fairs and knew how to talk to curators, knew how to talk to collectors, and he was bringing Rick's work, among all the other artists he worked with, to art fairs in New York and Chicago and Los Angeles. So Julie and Rick understood that William was helping Rick take his artwork to the next level, making all the work that was sincerely most authentic Rick. So 1986 or 7, a collector from New York City comes to Portland for an exhibition of their art, of their collection at the Portland Art Museum. And this man's name is Richard Brown Baker. And he didn't have a history in the Northwest, but he sure had a history in the Northeast. He was a Yale graduate, and he had a fortune of some sort, and he was an avid art collector, and he was on museum boards. I think he was on the Guggenheim and the Whitney boards. He was, and he was a generous donor to the Yale University Art Gallery, which is their museum. It's an encyclopedic museum at Yale University. So here's Rick bringing artwork to William's gallery. William Jameson and Jeffrey Thomas, who is still here in Portland. So they're showing Rick's work, and in walks Richard Brown Baker. And because he wanted to see all the art galleries in Portland while he was visiting for this exhibition of his collection. And Richard Brown Baker is flipped out. He's wowed, and he's looking at these drawings, which Rick and William and Jeffrey just have spread out on the floor. So it just goes to show that it's okay to look at artwork on the floor sometimes. It happens in my gallery to this day. A painting doesn't have to be good, only, you know, on the wall to be good. So Richard Brown Baker says, like, oh, I can't decide which one to buy, so I'll take all 6 of these. And, you know, 2 birds told 2 more birds told 2 more birds, and all of a sudden Portland, 1986 or 7, people are like, oh my gosh, this collector from New York City came in and bought 6 of Rick's drawings, and you know, and all this stuff. So it's a huge confidence boost for William, being a dealer, selling 6 works by a new artist is fantastic, and for Rick as well. So Rick had already thought, this guy has something going on, because there was an African collection that Richard Brown Baker had bought, had a collection of African sculpture, and it included these Kondi figures with nails all in it. And Rick was very taken with that exhibition. And so it was a boost to both William and Rick that Rick wasn't just an artist who would be showing at coffee shops in Oregon. And he wasn't just an artist that would be, you know, have meaning and resonance here in Oregon, but his work meant something, and it struck chords. And that kind of started the ball rolling. So from there, curators were seeing Rick's work through, I mean, Rick had lots of great friends: Lillian Pitt, Elizabeth Woody, Gail Tremblay, Joe Fedderson, Brian Tripp, Frank LaPena, Harry Fonseca. There were artists that he wanted to meet, and he was meeting and making art with. Jim Lavador, and they were swapping studio stories and saying, Rick, you need to be in this show. And to curators, like for experienced artists like Gail and Joe and Jim, who were already in shows, they were telling the curators, well, you've got to go check out Rick Bartow's artwork. So Rick was making a name for himself in a number of ways. And there's a curator who in my mind is real legendary, Margaret Archuleta. And she was at the Heard Museum, and she was organizing the biennials and at the Heard Museum. And that was a fantastic series of shows. And one of those turned into an internationally traveling exhibit. And it gave Rick, I mean, just, he started, it was really, Rick was on a roll. And Rick started to meet artists from around the country, not just around the Pacific Northwest, and started meeting curators and artists from Canada, from the far, from Mexico, from Hawaii, from Japan, from Germany, from South America. So Rick's mind was a sponge. He was a visual omnivore. His ear was so finely tuned. His eye and his hand were so finely tuned. So it was, I think, from 1979 on, Rick's life could be a blur, but he had he had incredible memory of everything. And it was just an upward trajectory of more affirmation. He experimented every year of his life. Of course, he had setbacks and artist blocks at times, but he would get back up on the horse, and he'd go back in the studio, and he always had tomorrow to look forward to make more artwork and drawings and paintings. So I tried to not stray too far off course. But Rick is a force of nature. All of us were just like, help me keep up with him. You know, like I had to wear roller skates.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So
Would you say that there were, I don't know, Rick's work is so original, but would you say that there were influences, other artistic influences that you can see in his, in some of his work, or would he point to artists that he was inspired by? Or?
oh goodness, yes. Rick loved to honor and recognize the artists that were influences to him, and he talked about the gratitude, like, and the like wow factor of like he's from a line of people that want to make marks that stretches all the way back to when the fur from the tail of a coyote or the wing of a bird is turned into a flute and you make music, or the coyote tail is turned into a brush and you mash up a berry and you put a mark on a stone wall, on a cave wall, or you're painting at the Louvre and your studio's in New York City. Rick was part of that line. He understood that it was both ancient and it was contemporary.
Right.
And so his time down at Joey's, down at Panini and at Moe's and at all of the Cosmos Cafe and Mundo, Newport, he loved talking with artists, both young and mature, both experienced and inexperienced. He hated pompous artists, though, I'll tell you that. He was like, he might have been pleasant in person, but when they left the room, he slayed them. It was like anybody who tried to get away with putting on an air in front of Rick.
Yeah. Forget about it.
Forget it. Yeah.
And you can see there's many of his pieces that are done in homage to different artists, and not just Native American artists, not just from his particular lineage, but through the world of art. He was so well read. He was so well exposed by his own desire and drive to see and experience other people's art. And he would recognize that in the titles. Of course, Charles, you might be able to remember an example, but I know that he was doing that as part of his, almost like his declaration of his membership in this group, as well as his appreciation and honoring those that came before him.
For sure. He would use their initials, like FL for Frank LaPena,
Right.
FS for Fritz Scholder,
Right.
MG for Morris Graves. He would use their initials, but he also would say like for Klimt, for
Yeah.
Keita Kollwitz, for Monet.
Yes.
He drew himself with like Monet's hat or Rembrandt's hat, but he also said he strove to make it authentically his own art. He did not
Correct.
he didn't do just copying just to be a copy artist, but to interpret and learn from that artist's mark or gesture.
It's like when musicians copy certain riffs or a succession of notes from a Jimi Hendrix composition. They're not trying to be Jimi Hendrix, but they are letting you know that that is part of the inspiration for what they're doing in that moment. It's very similar to that, wouldn't you say? Yeah,
for sure.
Well, let's this is a wonderful discussion. Let's transition to a specific print that is actually in the Oregon Coast online show and is available for purchase. This print is called Coyote, Where Are You Going? It's an offset lithograph with 5 colors, 53 inches by 73 inches. And it is, there are a number of prints available at $1,800 a piece, which will benefit both the artists and the gallery and the Visual Arts Center. And really special treat that the Bartow estate was willing to make these available. Justin, I think, can put up a slide of Coyote, Where Are You Going? And Karen, you have a print behind you, I think, if you want to show people.
Yes, I do. I just took it out of my office. And for those of you in the Newport area, there's also one at the hospital that I was so pleased to donate to the acquisition committee at the hospital. They put together a lot of local artists to help in the healing process. You know, there's a big movement in the last 20 years using art to help healing. And if anybody's art is healing, it's Bartow's art, because that was the place that he was coming from. But let me get this so you can see it. There we go. The lights are kind of shining on it. Great job of framing from Fornash Gallery, but goodness, it's just such a wonderful piece. And I chose it because the colors are exciting and interesting. And the coyote always looked to me like he was smiling with that little, with it smiling through his eyes. Yet one could see a lot of the marks that we gather throughout our lives of hurts and hits and disappointments and expectations that are dashed. And there it is, but he's still moving forward. And where are you going? I mean, that's a good question for all of us to be contemplating at this time. Where are we going? Because we're at a crossroads.
Charles, you were speaking before we came on air about some of the text that or copy that's on the print. Can you share that with folks?
Sure. Well, when Rick made this in 1997, this is a bit of family history for Rick, but from his grandfather's side, from his father's father, the lineage was from an indigenous tribe in California. And early on, the family were under the impression, they thought they were members of the Yurok tribe, which is on the Mad River, Northern California, Humboldt area. And so they were registered with Yurok. And Rick was, as Karen was telling me, Rick was working on a glossary of the Yurok language with one of the cultural leaders from the Yurok tribe. And so Rick was working to learn the whole language, to commit these to memory so he could make sentences and speak it.
And incorporate it in his music.
Yeah.
There's lots of his Sweat Lodge songs were done in that language. He would bring that into his song and his prayer. Yeah.
So this, Rick would title a lot of his artwork with the Yurok language also. So this is not unusual, or there are other instances of it also, but Segiep, that's coyote. And so Kosket Satamp is written on the print. So that's coyote, where are you going? And you see coyote on the tail of this coyote, or Segiep is written there. To kind of decipher a few of the things written on this print, if you look on the far left, just kind of below the coyote's nose, you'll see it's Japanese writing that goes up the side, and that's Rick's name in Japanese. And then up the right-hand margin of the print is, well, Rick translated this, and I can't tell how it's written, how to pronounce this, but it basically says, "Hello, relative who speaks another language." So I think Rick, in learning Yurok and also thinking about the coyote or the salmon, Rick talked about, the animals were all relative, and whether it's the trees or the salmon or the coyote and the humans that were relatives. So all these different languages. And then on the bottom right-hand corner, Rick, in his acknowledgement that he often does, says thank you to both the printer BJ and the what Rick called the boss of Brandywine, Alan Edmonds, or Edwards, who had founded Brandywine Workshop in Philadelphia. So Rick created this in '97 at Brandywine Workshop, and that is a lithography studio in Philadelphia. And Alan had founded it, and it's very much it's an African-American run art studio. And so it was very exciting for Rick to be invited there as a Native American, as an indigenous American. He understood and they understood him. And it was a really fine residency. So Brandywine Workshop is still going. It's a great print studio.
Well, it's wonderful to learn more about the background on this particular lithograph. Coyote, where are you going? And again, it is available through the Oregon Coast Online Art Show. There are a limited number available, and it's a limited series. And it sounds like we sold one yesterday, so that's wonderful news. It's interesting that when you're thinking about Rick's legacy, if you will, that he passed away in the middle of a major touring retrospective of his work, titled Things You Know But Cannot Explain, and that his legacy was celebrated on a national level at the very time that he was moving on. And Charles, can you talk a little bit about how that exhibit, Things You Know But Cannot Explain, furthered Rick's legacy, and where you see that legacy moving forward in the near future?
Sure. Rick and I started working with the University of Oregon in 2013 to organize this show. So it was, and then it launched at University of Oregon in 2015. So it was a good 2.5, 3 years that we were, it felt like getting exam and history, being questioned about every aspect of Rick's work by these curators and the organizers. But that's how you build a good show. I mean, we put in so much energy and commitment to opening up the archive of Rick's, everything that had ever been written about Rick, all the images of Rick's artwork from his whole career that I had on in my gallery, so that the curators could make the best choice of the work and write new insights and put context to his work by both interviewing Rick and reading what other people had written about Rick, and then looking at the artwork very closely. So it was a lot of work, and Rick knew, he could see it, he appreciated it greatly. But yes, he passed away then in 2016. So it was not even 1 year into the tour of the show that Rick passed away, and it was at the second venue. It opened at University of Oregon in Eugene, and then it went to the Gilcrease Museum in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and it was there. It was on view there when Rick passed away, and Rick was not even able to go to Tulsa for that exhibition because he was too ill. So it was, it's heartbreaking to think of that he didn't get to enjoy and see the full, the tour of the show, all of the cities. But I'll tell you, it was grueling just being in Eugene, and they celebrated him, and we celebrated Rick.
A whole week.
Yeah.
A whole week. It was great.
So much celebration. And there are still great ways that people can see that. Like, there are videos that the University of Oregon produced on Rick being interviewed and discussing the artwork, and then making a series of prints that were in honor to his grandfather, his dad's dad, Mad River Johnny.
Mhm.
So that's one of the very long-lasting legacies, that we have an audio and visual recording of Rick from this show. The book as well is a fantastic book. This is the first edition, but it's in the third edition. We have them, well, the University of Oregon has them, my gallery has them for sale, but this book, yeah, the show traveled to 11 museums.
Don't remember, Charles, it was originally set for 3 years, which is a normal amount of time for a show like this to tour. And we extended it 2 more years because of the demand to get that show in different museums and venues. It was very gratifying, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was amazing to see crowds coming in to see the shows in Phoenix and Los Angeles, and to see articles in the newspapers, in the weekly and the daily newspapers, and radio programs in various cities. So a museum show there's nothing quite like that to bring attention to an artist's work. And then for a traveling show, like we had to make commitments of lending the work for all of these years. And it meant that the work was pretty much held outside of, I couldn't sell it. Or if I was committing to sell the work, we had to make extra sure that the client, that person that was wanting to buy it, or the museum, that they were willing for it to continue in the tour, because the University of Oregon had made all these commitments for the show for a lengthy exhibition tour.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, the last show was in 2020 in, was it Boise? I think.
It was not this year.
Oh, not this year. Okay. My mistake.
And the last show was in Montana.
Oh.
Boise came before Montana.
Boise
Yeah,
before
Boise, then to the High Desert Museum in Bend,
Okay.
and then to Montana. And Montana was the last venue. And I believe that was 2019.
So Karen, as a trustee with the estate, can you share with us how the estate views its role right now in continuing keeping the Bartow legacy alive?
Well, Tom, you're contributing to that today, because anytime we get to talk about him, and especially in a venue like this, people will get to Google it or YouTube, find it, and learn more about Bartow. And some of the things that Charles and I have been able to share today are not well-known information and facts and stories from his life. So this has been a very special hour. One of the things that we're looking forward to in the coming year or so, well, of course, we're going to produce another calendar. And we did last year. It was an incredible hit among the folks who received it, and the folks who were gifted it, and the folks who bought it. It was really a wonderful endeavor. And we're in the process right now of putting the second edition, the 2021 Bartow calendar together. So that's a great way to continue to have him reach the people. You know, it's not a big investment. Everybody gets to have at least 12 Bartow, and we do it in such a way that you can cut those pictures out and frame them. I mean, they're in very, very good, what do we call it? The colors and everything are exactly the way Rick put them on paper. There's that. And we had a wonderful experience this year where we were able to gather all of Rick's music, recordings, masters, and now they're part of Rick's trust and legacy. We worked with a local publisher to put together a book of the lyrics from 48 of his original songs that have been produced on CDs. So we're exploring different ways that we can put together something where folks can access not only his music, but the lyrics, which are very poetic and wonderful, and coupled with his art. So we have something in the works, but what it's going to look like when it eventually hits the public is unknown to us. It's all in progress, but we're very excited about that. That'll be a new thing that we're going to get to engage in this year.
Wonderful. Well, you know, I got to know Rick just briefly, I would say, when I moved to Newport. I moved here in August of 2014 and met him a number of times, and he was always very supportive of me as a new person in town and encouraging. And by the time, after about a year or so, we were pretty much on a first name basis, and it was wonderful. I just was heartbroken when he passed because I didn't feel like I had enough time to get to know him as much as I would have liked. But we did here at the Visual Arts Center try to also continue his legacy, and we will, given that he is a native son to Newport. We put together a lender show in the summer of 2016, with which Karen and Charles both helped with. We did it on very short notice, and the community responded in a very meaningful way. We had, I think, over 56 paintings lent or works lent by over 26 people. And that was a major summer exhibit for us. None of the works were for sale, which didn't matter at all, but it was a powerful show. And then a couple years later, we discovered that the Newport Public Library had a collection of his author drawings, and that they had put up 2 or 3 in the library, but most of there were 16 total. And so the rest of those author drawings, original pieces, had never really seen the light of day. So we brought those out, got some funds to frame them and put them up as a gallery exhibit here at the Visual Arts Center, which was, I think, a couple years ago. And then we, working with the library worked to have those author drawings travel throughout libraries in Oregon. And I think they are scheduled probably to come back to the Newport Public Library here in the near future.
Actually, hey, Tom, we were just getting ready to connect with the Multnomah County Library system so that they move around through that system. And especially for the school children, because they're, and the high school kids, they're so instructive and really great for teachers, art teachers, English teachers to connect with these author drawings. And that's when COVID hit. So as far as I'm concerned, that's still in the starting block, and we're hoping to move forward with that.
Oh, wonderful. That's new news to me. So I'm excited to hear that. Eventually they will make their way back to the Newport Public Library. Will they be on permanent exhibit? People, of course, can see more of Rick's work on the Frolic Gallery website. If you do some Google searches, you'll see different videos and all sorts of background on the artist Rick Bartow.
Can I add something, Tom? That we will be installing an exhibit of Rick's work this next week at my gallery.
Oh,
and,
excellent!
It's hard picking a show of Rick's work, but we're focusing on the crows. The title of the show is Crow's Instructions. There's a print with that title. And that piece is an honor, an homage to one of his college professors, Jim Mattingly. And so one of Rick's instructors. Right. So Crow's Instructions is the show title. We'll really give a lot of attention to the corvids, to the ravens and crows that Rick loved so much, and the stories that Rick put in there. But we'll have prints and drawings and paintings, and a sculpture too.
Mhm.
And we will have programs. We'll have a broadcast program later, but our website has the artwork, and the gallery has a YouTube channel, and we've tried to put Rick's videos there also. So that's a good resource for people to watch more videos with Rick actually in them.
So Charles, remind us, what is the opening date and what are your gallery hours now?
The show will be open next Wednesday, the 15th, or Thursday, whatever day that is. We'll be installing early in the week. We are open by appointment. We have a limited number of people that we can allow in the gallery for safety. So it's 4 people at a time. But if you call us 503-222-1142 to make an appointment, we'd love to see you at the gallery. Someone is pretty much available Tuesday through Saturday, 11 to 5:30 for those appointments. And the show will be up through the end of November.
Excellent. Well, I hope to make it out to Portland for that. That would be wonderful.
I'd love to see you.
I think we'll wrap up. Unless Charles or Karen, do you have any final words you'd like to share?
You know, I just want to say that when I was interviewing with Leslie O'Donnell for the article that came out in the paper, which by the way is an amazing piece, she did a beautiful job. It occurred to me how important art is, but especially Rick's art, because of its ability to communicate on so many levels. And we're in a time right now in our community and in our world where we are at an unknown, a huge unknown. We're at a cliff, and we don't know what things are going to look like in the future. So I just want to encourage anyone who's listening right now to take some time to do some looking around, go to the Froelich website and look at some of the, not only Rick's art, Charles represents a lot of wonderful artists, and to avail themselves of the online art show to see what folks on this coast are doing. It really does make you feel better, and it reminds us of how we are connected to the natural world, to each other, and to our own selves. So I would like to just share that with the viewers.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, again, this has been Tom Webb with the Oregon Coast Art Talk series. I want to thank Charles Froelich and Karen Murphy for this wonderful discussion on Rick Bartow and placing him in context of our community and our art world. We're excited. Next Sunday, October 18th, we will be having a virtual studio tour with Maria Sund, who is a collage artist, a wonderful collage artist out of Otis, Oregon. So these will continue. And of course, you can let people know that these panel discussions and gallery tours are also can be watched on rebroadcast on YouTube Live if you search for Oregon Coast Council for the Arts. All right, I think we'll sign off. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks again, Charles and Karen.
Thank you, Tom and Karen.
Thanks,
It's been a pleasure.
It's been great. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Justin.